So welcome everyone to the Open World Summit 2020 Virtual Edition. Happy to have you all here with us. We've got an awesome session planned out. We're going to be talking about developing Web3 protocols. And please feel free to drop some questions into the chat or tweet at us at the hashtag OWS, and we'll be sure to answer your questions if we get some time at the end of this. So my name is Mason Nystrom. I'm a research analyst at Messari, a crypto data and analytics firm. And I'll be moderating our esteemed panel with experts across DeFi protocols and builders of new and emerging protocols. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Lazaro Gustave from Aave, Mickey Maher from Dapper Labs, and Danny Zuckerman from Threebox. So before we get started, I'd like to just kind of quickly outline a definition for Web3 because it's kind of this nebulous term. So I kind of view Web3 as the shift towards a more democratized internet, an internet that is governed by the collective rather than by large organizations or any one entity. So if that sounds like a fair definition, then we can start with that. Now, I'd love some introductions from all of our panelists. So Danny, if we could start with you. Could you please introduce yourself and give us a few sentences about what you're building?
Sure thing. So I'm Danny Zuckerman, co-founder and COO of Threebox. Right now, we're most focused on building Ceramic, which is probably best thought of as a network for verifiable information. So if databases, including distributed databases, are for private and general information and blockchains are for consensus on information, Ceramic, it's really a data web for publishing, linking, and discovering trusted and verifiable information. So to make that a bit more concrete, the first thing we're using it for is identity information. So this will include the 25,000 identities and hundreds of apps that have been created on Threebox to date, which is really a profile and data storage framework for mostly Ethereum apps. But Ceramic provides a way to link many different keys and accounts and profiles, settings, databases, any other resource into one flexible identity index, which can be used across any blockchain, network, or application. So it's the first really truly interoperable and seamless framework for managing decentralized identities. Makes it so developers can leverage kind of this shared index of information about users rather than starting cold, and makes sure the user experience across different blockchains and networks and applications is really seamless, and that data and information is composable as well as assets.
Awesome, thank you. Jordan?
Hi, everyone. So I'm Jordan. I'm the CEO of Aave. And at Aave, we are building infrastructure financial products for the Ethereum ecosystem and blockchain at large. Aave is the money market protocol, and the idea is to use assets that are cryptographic assets as collateral to unlock liquidity and value. On the other side, other thing that you can do with the protocol as a developer, as a user, is things like flash loans, which allows you to borrow within one Ethereum transactions, or also credit delegations, which can be under collateralized or no collateralized loans, and many type of different financial infrastructure. The idea is to really build like building blocks for the future of finance, which institutions and consumer-facing application can build on.
Great. And then last but not least, Mickey.
It could be least, who knows? Mickey Maher, I am head of partnerships at Dapper Labs. We built and just launched the Flow blockchain. Flow is the platform for the next generation of games, entertainment apps, and digital assets. And essentially Flow is a scalable blockchain with easy onboarding, seamless UX that's targeted to a mass audience who just want to enjoy all the benefits of what games and apps have to offer on the blockchain. And Flow is just enabling a mass market user to be able to participate in that. On top of building and launching Flow, we have something called Dapper Studios, and Dapper Studios is building the first experiences on top of Flow, most notably NBA Top Shot in our partnership with the NBA, And the Dapper Studio will be kicking out multiple different projects, partnering up with different IPs that will showcase what can be done and what is powerful and interesting about building on Flow.
Appreciate those introductions. I think those were pretty succinct. So without further ado, let's kind of just jump right into it. I think this is a really cool panel because we have such a broad mix of what everyone's building. And so I'd love for you to kind of outline what makes your protocol or software really necessary for the advancement of Web3 and this entire paradigm shift. So if Mickey, we can start with you this time.
Yeah, sure. Flow was really came to life because of our real world experience with other protocols. So famously, I think probably everyone listening to this knows that Dapper Labs created CryptoKitties, and CryptoKitties was on Ethereum. But CryptoKitties was an entertainment experience in a game, and we peaked at something like 10, 20,000 users. And if you come from gaming, which I do, a typical game wouldn't even get out of the door if it was going to deem 10, 20,000 users a success. So we kind of took a deep look on how to solve that. And the first thing that we did is we talked to the Ethereum Foundation. We looked at all the other layer 1, layer 2 protocols that were out there to try to help us solve our problem. And our problem was, how do we fulfill our goal of bringing the first 100 million, if not billion, users to the blockchain? And the short answer to this is that nothing that we heard, no white papers that we read, really met what we needed to be able to accomplish that goal. So that essentially led us down the only path that we could have went down, is building our own blockchain to fulfill these needs. And Flow solves a lot of, Flow takes some of what Ethereum is and what's great about Ethereum, but it also improves upon some of the shortcomings of Ethereum and especially to support mass market experiences. I mean, Flow is much, magnitudes greater throughput than Ethereum. Flow has a very seamless, nice to easy used UX and payment system that more mirrors a traditional app store than it does a blockchain experience. We've made gas much cheaper and much more straightforward for others to pay, and so on and so forth. So we've made this consumer-friendly, scalable blockchain that is built to support a mass audience.
Definitely, and I think CryptoKitties still holds the record for most total volume of any NFT. So looking forward to NBA Top Shots and what you guys build on top of Flow.
I think that's true. Almost sadly, because for the space to move forward, CryptoKitties should not be the most widely used NFT app at this point. We're trying to change that with Flow.
Fair point. How about you, Jordan? How does Aave fit into the Web3 narrative and kind of advancing this trend?
I think in our case, it's all about like unlocking value, whether it's cryptographic assets, whether they are like liquid RC20 or NFTs. There is many places where you can unlock the value. And the idea of Aave is to be a money market protocol. So any market could be created, whether it's a market for liquid shares such as in Uniswap shares, or market for regular like assets. And I think we need those kind of infrastructure at the financial level.
Looks like we're having some technical difficulties.
To be very accessible and very developer friendly to build really the base layer. Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah, can you hear me?
Hey.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was saying like at our level, even if it seems that 1 billion over 1 billion market cap market share in the lending protocol is still like a proof of concept when you see the financial market. For example, one of the things where Aave pushed Web3 is now we have like all sort of L2, and with the idea of credit delegation, where you could actually build bridges between different L2 or between different blockchain using the credit delegation, because each of those L2 needs have like exit time, exit liquidity time, and you need like if you want seamless, let's say like connectors between different L2 or between different blockchains, you might need like delegation of credits, and Aave is actually the infrastructure to do that. For example, another thing is the A tokens. We created this stable increasing, balance increasing stable coins, and when you deposit in Aave, for example, DAI, you will get a DAI, and what a DAI does is that it increases in balance within your wallet, so you could actually pay with a stable coin, which always gets the yield of the lending protocol behind. And I think like all those tools, whether it's stable coins, the stable increasing balance stable coins, credit delegation, flash loan, or even like stable interest rates, are really building block for financial infrastructure. And then it's the rest for other people to build in our ecosystem to push forward.
Definitely, I think that financial infrastructure kind of sets the foundation for what will be possible on top of Web3. Danny, you were talking about ceramic and the importance of identity. How does that kind of tie into Web3, and where do you see Threebox kind of being a positive light for Web3 in that manner?
Yeah, well, I really like your definition of Web3. And one of the things that we saw about this time last year was really rapid advancement in a lot of different parts of Web3 and a lot of the different pieces that are going to push it forward, including more easy to use blockchains like Flow, including the financial infrastructure, but also wallets and key management and authentication solutions that actually make it easier, like Portis and Magic and Ethereum and others, and indexing like the Graph, and distributed databases, which isn't directly blockchain, but highly related. And you can keep going down the list, but a lot of those advances were happening a little bit in silos. They were really exciting advances in technology, but it was still really hard to put them together. And each of them have kind of their own foundations and infrastructure, down to, in the case of blockchains and distributed databases, especially the key level. And keys really create their own silos if you're using that as a primary way to authenticate signed transactions, and especially if you use it as an identity, which a lot of people kind of de facto were because there wasn't anything better. But these all create just as much, if not more, fragmentation than we have in Web 2, with fragmented servers keeping track of data and identity and information. And so Ceramic is really created to be the glue between not just keys, but all of these different infrastructures and developer tools and pieces being built. Again, if you think of Ceramic as a kind of shared source of truth for verifiable information, it's a way for multiple parties to discover information that others have put out there and trust it, and build off that. And so Ceramic is general, but the identity piece, which you asked about, makes it really easy to link keys from Flow and keys from Ethereum and keys from Near. And if you have multiple different keys on Flow or Ethereum, to which a lot of folks do and will continue to link those all together and be able to use profiles, settings, configurations across chains. But even beyond that, to also be able to use the same identity when you're trying to get access to your just general off-chain data without having to manage a key for your data and a key for your assets. And that just will inherently make the user experience really difficult. And so it just gives a common framework for developers to build on shared identity infrastructure, shared information infrastructure. And for users, it means the experience can actually be not just seamless, but magical, because information that they give access to can populate across all these different apps and tools across Web3. And for devs, it means whatever part of the Web3 ecosystem you're building in, you're not starting cold. You have access to all of these other technologies because you now have a glue between them. And you now have cumulative advances for Web3 as opposed to everything happening in silos.
Definitely. I think something as easy as Google login in a world where we don't have to memorize seed phrases sounds much better to me. You mentioned how creating a flow to make sure that developers also have an easy time developing, but also one where users are also able to kind of easily and seamlessly interface with, the Web3 world. And I think that kind of goes into the fact that you have not only product market fit with your users, but you also have this developer product fit. And so I'd love to get each of your thoughts about how do you bootstrap your network, and how does that differ when you're looking at developers versus maybe the everyday user that will actually, interface with the product. So this time, Jordan, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think it really depends, like whether you are like base layer or an application, and also like everything is moving so fast in our industry that it depends even like when it happens. For example, we saw recently how Uniswap or our Compound incentives their user with the distribution of tokens, and I think that's a great point for the liquidity to comes. In the case of Aave, we really focused from the beginning on integrators and developers. So it was a lot of focus on the documentation, making sure the codes and everything was well written and be accessible. I saw, for example, Flow just like made their documentation also very accessible and very nice, which was cool to see. So we focused a lot of that. We focused on sharing the fees of the protocol with the integrators. So now we had teams that were sustainable because of the fees that they were making building on top of the Aave protocol. And after that, other dApps started to share fee with the integrators. So I think it really depends on where you are and what you're trying to achieve. Now we actually, something that is interesting is that most of the users of Aave are actually smart contracts. So somehow for now, that was a success. Like we have Wire and Curve and many other DeFi server, which are actively, I think DeFi server is the most user of the flash loan feature. Wire is the biggest user of the credit delegation in Aave. So like having those smart contracts using was really the continuation of like a focus on the developer access. And on the user side, it's just about making sure they understand the risk. I think this is still very important because you can have like a very beautiful UI and everything very easy to use. But then if there is an issue, which can always happen in DeFi, you lose all your end user very quickly. So making sure you share the risk, making sure you share everything that relates to all the compounded risk, whether it's the layer, smart contracts, the economical risk, and protecting the user in the configuration of the parameters. And then it's about sharing in the end the governance power, and this is our focus currently with the launch of the V2 and the token swap that is coming. And now it's about distributing the power to those users, to those smart contract user. And yeah, I think it really depends. It's really flexible. I'm not sure there is like one answer to solve how to bootstrap a community.
That's a totally fair point to make. It is incredibly different between what you're building. So Mickey, from your guys' perspective of building this new layer one, how do you guys view it from building for developers, but also building for end users so that it is a fun experience for them?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think we've taken a much different approach, especially on the developer side. We've seen plenty of layer ones launch with great technology, but not a lot of users or activity in the blockchain, which then developers don't really want to go there. So we're eating our own dog food, so to speak, where we're building experiences that are leveraging IPs that have billions of fans or following globally. And that's just going to jumpstart the network effects and bring in the first millions of users. So when a protocol has millions and millions of users, it becomes very, very attractive to developers. There's activity, there's users to market to, there's liquidity in the market, there's transactions flowing through. So I think one of the first, to summarize, the first thing we're doing is we're bringing in the users through our own experiences. And this is not an easy thing to do. It's a lot of work, both on the development and partnerships team, to be able to do these things, to be able to seed the network with its first users. And I say from a user perspective, once they're in, some of the things we're doing is we're making it easy for them to transact. I mean, the default transaction method on NBA Top Shot is credit card or fiat. But beyond that, ease of transaction, but also being able to transact very cheaply or preferably free. So we've made the gas concept on Flow much cheaper than it is on Ethereum, and much more transparent. And what else we've done is we've built the ability into the protocol for anyone to pay gas on behalf of anyone else. So the idea here is that the developer, can afford to and wants to pay gas on behalf of their users, to allow users to come in and transact and interact with their experiences at no cost, right? So I think that's an important concept, because I think, on Ethereum, it's very hard to pay gas on behalf of your users, and having users have to pay dollars or tens of dollars to be able to transact on a blockchain is kind of shooting yourself in the foot from the beginning. So I think at the core, we wanted to solve those problems, to both make it a thriving ecosystem for developers to build on, and to make it a friendly, not scary place or not expensive place for users to interact with.
Yeah, I think that you've even seen other companies like Coinbase try and add gasless transactions to their USDC stablecoin transfers. So I think that there is definitely a pickup on wanting to obfuscate that from the user side of things. Danny, how do you kind of look at it? Specifically, kind of building for developers in that way.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, we are pretty developer focused, even though identity is inherently eventually impacts users, and it's about empowering them. But I mean, I think there's some ways in which building at this point in Web3 is different than building more traditional products and communities, but there's some ways in which it's the same. And I think we sometimes forget that. And in kind of the same category, it's like, I think the best way is to build something developers need and iterate on it with them. That's kind of been our guiding principle since we got started, is there's so much to do. There's so much still to be built, that if you are really intentional about being community first and talking to your customers and those developers about what they need, and making sure that you stay pointed towards where needs are today, not your end state vision, even while you keep that in mind, then you're going to build up a really good customer base and a really good community base. And those can kind of be the same early. And so for us, that meant when we got started, we had, certain identity products in mind, but really, 2 years ago, developers were desperate for a way to manage data and have more human applications. And so we built Threebox first as really a user management and profiles and data management framework. That's what people needed. Identity was really just in the background as an enabler. But then the ecosystem evolved, and more blockchains started emerging, and more tools started emerging. And that's the point at which the needs of developers changed, and it became clear it was time to move to something new, and to Ceramic. So I really do think that keeping in mind the product and growth and development practices that have worked is the first step. Then there are things that are different. I think one interesting thing is traditionally developers, it's all about getting to like a very short time to value. Developers are going to be very impatient if they don't see the value of what you're building very quickly. And I think in our space, because it's so new and because your customers, these developers are also building a part of the space themselves, there's more understanding, and they're willing to, if they see value in what you're doing and they trust your team, they're not just going to be customers of an alpha product. They're going to help you build the beta product, and they're going to go tell everybody about it. And so I think using this early moment where it really is in some ways a movement, and developers are going to to jump in more deeply and maybe overlook some early bugs more so than we're used to is the best way to build a really early community of strong supporters and people who are going to help kind of push your product and your team and your ecosystem forward.
On that note, is there any or go for it, Mickey?
Yeah, I was just going to say that's a great point. Our early Flow community has been so awesome at building the first experiences, the first tools and apps on the blockchain. So that we have a very active and thriving community that's helping us build the blockchain infrastructure from the ground up. So I agree with that point for sure, Danny.
Are there any specific tactics or incentives that you guys believe are strongest at incentivizing and bringing in that early community?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, go Mickey if you have thoughts on it, or Danny or Jordan.
Well, I think for us, we pride ourselves on treating this early community as partners, Dapper Labs partners, and Flow partners. We have an alpha program which developers can enter, which we help them and mentor them from anything from business development deals to fundraising to best practices on building on Flow. So we're really taking a hands-on approach to not only help these developers build the best projects for Flow with all kinds of different programs, open world builders program, etc. But we're very open to promoting them. Help if their project becomes a business, helping them raise funds. Really taking like a true partnership approach to these initial community members. So. And frankly, there's quite a few of them that are going to be the first node validators on Flow. So there's all kinds of different opportunities that we're enabling for our initial community members.
No, I think the partnership approach. Go ahead, Mason.
I was just saying that's a good point. Go for it about the partnership approach.
Yeah, no, I agree too. Incentives conjures to mind certain things immediately in our space, which I think it's worth talking about a little bit. I think the best incentive is build something people need and show that you're going to keep doing that. And that's going to get people involved faster than anything and more long-term than anything. I do think when we talk about incentives, we're going to talk about tokens a little bit. And I think there's a double-edged sword there. And you have to think about that really carefully. I think the ownership economy is going to be incredibly powerful. If you can give your community, especially the ones helping drive you forward, a stake in it because it's the right thing to do to reward the people that helped you create something early, and also because it just creates such a powerful movement around what you're building that can be incredibly powerful. I think it's one of the biggest things we're going to see make Web3 succeed as this takes off. At the same time, though, you don't want to, I don't think, lead with that. You don't want to fill your early community with people who are in it just for the token and who are the mercenaries and are going to leave as soon as the rewards change because they're not going to add the right feedback to your product development. They're not going to be the ones who articulate your vision as it changes to the next people that are going to come in. And so I think that being really intentional about how you want to treat your community and who it's made up of. And again, I think Mickey's point about thinking of them as partners is really the right approach, is critical.
Yeah, I agree with both. In our case, it was also a lot of having one killer feature that isn't available elsewhere. I think that helps a lot because eventually we all like target developers firstly, and you need them to be excited, and you need them to you need to keep excited their curiousness. And if you have the curiosity that is there, then I think it follows. And in the case of treating everyone as partner, I think that's also very like it's something that is critical. In Aave, translated by communicating on our partner, communicating on our ecosystem the same way we communicate on the things that are done at the base layer of our protocol. which means making memes, making all kind of things for our community. And I think that was a lot of fun for us and for them as well.
Definitely, never underestimate the potential of a great meme. So as we kind of look at, how do we get to Web3 at scale, and whether that's, both from like developers and from users, what do you guys see as kind of the primary barriers that are preventing us from getting to hundreds of thousands, if not tens of millions of people using these blockchain networks? Jordan, do you have any thoughts?
In our case, it's quite specific. I think there is a case about privacy in financial transactions, which are quite important and still something that the space hasn't got around. We are actively researching that aspect. Then, of course, there is the regulation that needs to move. Innovation move faster than the regulators, so it's all about keeping that door open with them and basically educating the regulators on what's happening. Eventually, if we want to have billion of users, it cannot happen just like within a group of 10,000 developers that are just like knowing each other and meeting once a year. We need all institutions to be onboarded as well. And then we have like the smaller issue, which can be easily solved, like the gas fees and all those secondary issue. But I think, yeah, the regulation, privacy are quite big hurdles, and identity as well is quite important. If we want to see things like credit rating and all that kind of things on chain, I think it's part of it.
Yeah, I think getting to a world, especially in DeFi, with under collateralized loans will require some component of privacy and identity. Mickey, any particular barriers that you see from your guys' end?
Yeah, look, I spoke at the top here about how Flow is addressing a lot of this stuff. I mean, scalability, UX, identity, they were all barriers, which we learned with CryptoKitties, and we've addressed them with Flow. I didn't talk about identity, but if you go to a Flow experience, we have the Dapper login where you can sign up and log in with a username and password, and that kind of gives you access to our wallets and payment mechanisms and et cetera, and that kind of carries you across Flow experiences, right? So we think with Flow we've solved a lot of these technical problems, but personally speaking, and I think a big thing here is the distribution mechanisms of apps, right? There's no real Web3 app store that's taken off or has millions of users. It's still a little bit difficult, and the rules are vague of how you get on the app stores. I think getting on mobile and being able to do everything that is cool with the blockchain within the mobile app stores, it would be a big benefit to the space. I think that'll come soon enough. And we're working with the different app stores to kind of figure this out. But I think like discovery and distribution of these blockchain Web3 apps and games, I think is another problem that needs to be solved that isn't exactly solved yet. That's
a great point. For those who haven't been following the Fortnite Apple App Store debacle, I highly recommend going and checking out Brian Armstrong's Twitter thread, because he came out with kind of some good points of how Coinbase is limited on the App Store as well. So I think that is a problem that definitely needs to be solved for mass consumer adoption. Danny, how about from your side? What barriers are you particularly thinking through?
Yeah. So I agree with all the points. I guess I'd add more of a general point rather than any one specific thing, because I think there's a whole bunch of specific things, and as soon as one is solved, the next one's going to become the next biggest bottleneck. And so I don't want to pretend to be able to anticipate exactly what order those will fall down in. But I think there's two sides to this. We usually focus on the friction points and what needs to get easier and smoother for these applications to get to mass market usage. But I also think there's still ways to go on creating enough value for users to use these applications and these products, and they'll go through some friction if there is enough value. Jake Bruckman at CoinFund has a really great piece on the 9 value propositions of blockchains and crypto networks. And each of them points to so many different opportunities to build products that, if it does that one thing really well, can start to get a foothold in a certain sector. And to, one of them is outcome certainty. That's like a brand new thing that wasn't possible before. There are sectors, maybe not the whole internet at first, where if you build products that takes advantage of that particular feature of blockchains, you can go really far. And so I think it's the combination of creating more value and knocking down some of the friction. I think that, if we look at how to do that, because that's easier said than done, the probably the fastest approach is to do something more vertically integrated, to do everything, because you can then control the pieces. That's, of course, what Dapper is doing by building everything that they need to deliver a really great experience, which I think having them and others take that approach is great. I think that doesn't get us all the way there, because now you need, if we're really trying to get to a Web3 that we're talking about and envisioning, there's no platforms. It's really, interoperable across all of these different pieces. And so, there'll still be a ways to go to make some of those different components and wallets, and we're particularly interested in identity, interoperable at its base. And so I think that, we'll see some more of these verticalized products and products that are built with bits of centralization, and then we'll have to migrate to something more open and fully decentralized.
I think that's pretty good points. And so when you kind of zoom out from, where we are right now and maybe look at Web3 in 10 years, what does that look like? What does that feel like, from using it, from interacting with it, from, your, whether it's respective viewpoints in DeFi or gaming, or developers, like developer tooling? Would love to kind of see where your visions are on that. So Danny, if we can start with you again.
Sure. There's a lot of different ways to take this. To me, the biggest thing is today we adapt to the web. Like every app and service stands on its own, and they might talk to each other through APIs a little bit, but like fundamentally it's silos all over the place, which means as we come to the internet in whatever form that takes, we, authenticate and log in a different way, and we fill out forms and we start over with new data. And every relationship we have with an app or service or business is like bilateral. It's like its own relationship. And that means we need to adapt to the business that we're interacting with, or the app that we're interacting with, and it's just fragmented and choppy. And it also means we have to go to the dominant platforms, because that's where there's network effects, and network effects create value. And so we really have to use the internet in the way it tells us to, rather than what I think we'll see 10 years from now, which is a web that adapts to us. We choose our own preferred apps and services and interfaces and operating systems, and we can switch freely between them whenever we see a new, better product or better pricing or something that fits our new use case better, or what we can tack on a new patch. And that's going to be possible because data and networks and value are not embedded into an interface or a product. They're separate from it. It comes with us. And so that means building for the web is different too. I think this is where things get really interesting. There's no incentive for people building new businesses and applications to do everything they can to attract a huge number of users and then extract as much value as they can later. The bait and switch that we see like constantly, especially in business software, but in different ways in the consumer web too, because there's no ability to capture huge networks and huge amounts of attention and then sell it off to advertisers or the highest bidder and warp user experiences for whatever benefits the corporation that has control at the time, because there's no lock-in like there is today. So in that world, I think it's really hard to envision what we're going to see in terms of the new types of experiences, because value capture comes from value creation in a world when anyone can switch freely. You have to be constantly adding value, which means that innovation and building is going to constantly build on other experiences as opposed to starting over to try and create their own network. And so you have a web whose entire arc is bent towards collaboration and value creation, which just isn't the case today, because that's not what the incentives say. And so as each of those things compound, I think we have an internet where we come with our preferences and our settings and our previous data and history, and all of that can be applied to whatever we choose to want that day. And what we want that day is going to be increasingly changing as rapidly as we want and getting better constantly, because people can build off those foundations.
I like that framing, one in which the individual user is not the product. Jordan, any thoughts to add to that?
Yeah, I think the monetization of data by the user, individual user, and the ownership of that data will be quite big. I think we will see an important shift in brand loyalty, but not in the sense of user being loyal to a brand particular, but actually brand being loyal to their user, because they own, if they own everything, if we go from the state that user own their data, they can be the one monetizing, and they can switch very easily. I think it will see like a new era of brand loyalty where brand have to follow their own guidelines that they set, and the brand that you build upon, you have to make sure that you stay that way. The user can switch very easily. Like we've seen in DeFi even today that liquidity is not something that can be that is not a moat, but at the same time it is when you see the brand that some people are capable of building. So I think that will just be getting stronger, and that will be even stronger when every piece of data can be monetized and can be owned, whether it's time, pure time, attention, financial data, everything. Like everything can eventually be monetized, and everything can be eventually sold by this. So like even in the space of gaming, like we'll see kids learning about finance through games, because every assets, everything that they do on the game, they will be able to own it, and then they will be able to trade it, they will be able to collateralize it, they will be able to collect it. So I think like that will be a lot of fundamental change in currently compared to what we currently have.
Definitely. Nikki?
I'll be brief, because if you're asking me what 10 years from now looks like, I'm just making stuff up. So no one wants to hear that. But really, I think you see something that resembles a parallel world powered by blockchain. A lot of people envision this thing happening in VR, right? So there's this VR experience that a bunch of people are in that's like a different world that people are just living in day to day. I don't know, but I think there's going to be this huge economy in some type of virtual world powered by the blockchain, where everything you're doing commerce related digitally is powered by the blockchain, and it probably doesn't mirror the real world. It's probably a little bit more creative and utopian than that. But the blockchain will be the underlying infrastructure and commerce engine to that parallel world, I think.
I think that's an excellent framing. I'd like to kind of just end with some rapid fire questions, gauge your guys' thoughts. We can go in the same order just so it stays easy. So we'll start with Jordan, who's on my top left screen, then Danny, then Mickey. So the first question is, what are you most excited about in Web3 outside of what your individual team is building, whether it be DAOs, NFTs, vegetable farming?
For me, it's gaming. I think it's quite big, and there is all the components for gaming to fit in our ecosystem. So
for me, it's social money, in part because I'm excited and in part because I'm anxious about it, especially when applied to communities. It's an incredible tool to be able to reward community members and incentivize and coordinate them, but also there's a lot of research about the bad things that happen when you combine incentives like currency with reputation and morals and other motivations. And so I hope everyone is watching closely to see what actually happens as we introduce this and iterating on how it's deployed.
I think social money is very interesting, so I agree with that, but I'll go a different direction. But this is kind of cheating because it's part of flow. But I like, I'm really into composability. What we're seeing with DeFi, I think, is like just scratching the surface of composability. And I'm very interested to see what Web3 looks like in like 3 or 4 years with the composability aspect being taken advantage of, especially in NFT or gaming space. So I want to see what's being done in DeFi brought over to what we're enabling and where that goes.
I think those all are exciting topics. What is it, one book or piece of literature that you most recommend, and in a sentence, why?
It's easy. I would recommend L'Étranger by Camus. I think it's a great book, and in our space, a lot of the literature that is read is always linked to either like financial analysis, or even if it's a social thing, it's always through a mathematical or statistical aspects. I think people in our space don't read enough philosophy, don't read enough classical literature. And so Camus is a great writer from 20th century French literature, so I recommend L'Étranger. The Stranger, I think it's the English name.
Yeah, I love that answer. I'll go with Lessons of History. It's like a 90-page essay with insight on basically every line. Good wide-angle lens on anything to do with people, social groups, civilization. I reread it every couple of months and constantly recommend and give it away.
I'll go with Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, Holocaust survivor who was also a psychiatrist. It's essentially a journal of his experience in Auschwitz, and it's essentially basically views the human condition and shows how the humans can overcome anything, no matter how bad it gets. It's very life-changing book for me, at least.
I think those are all excellent recommendations and kind of touch on how this is as much a social revolution as it is a technological one. Last question, as we wrap up, where can listeners, viewers, watchers find you and interact with you and learn more about what you guys are building?
I think Twitter is the easiest. My Twitter is Jordan LZG. I think I'm quite reachable on Twitter. Or just jordan@aave.com is my email as well. Just reach out to me and ask a question or anything.
Yeah, of course, crypto Twitter is great. I'm DAZUCK, Dazuck on Twitter. Also, ceramic.network is our site. Links to our Discord where we're always hanging out, GitHub, mailing list, all that. So that's the best jumping off point.
Personally, I'm not a huge self-promoter, so my personal Twitter is boring. So I'm going to point you to the Flow Blockchain Twitter. It's @flow_blockchain. I, of course, will always, if someone wants to reach out for advice or information on Flow or anything, I can be reached at mickey@dapperlabs.com.
Awesome. Well, with that, we are at time. So I'd like to thank all of you again for providing these awesome insights. And this was a lot of fun, and let's do it again soon.
Thank you, Mason.
Thanks, Mason.